Hello there, and welcome to Wildcard Decks, a channel where we take a look at some of the more off-meta options and some cards that perhaps don't see a whole lot of use generally. And today we are looking at the Mando. So set 4 gave him pilots, which means that they are also upgrades, which means he can make use of his ability, and it gives him a lot more options and directions that he can go. So let's get into it. So just going for a 30 HP blue base, the others don't really particularly match up well with him. You might think Colossus with the extra HP could be useful, but with the Mandalorian, you're playing a unit and an upgrade, so you've got an even smaller hand than you had already, so it doesn't particularly work very well. What does the Mandalorian do? Because he's not particularly widely used. When you play an upgrade, you may exhaust this leader. If you do, exhaust an enemy unit with 4 or less remaining HP. So this is very good in the early game, and then it does fizzle out, unfortunately. Now, the 4 HP, when he's upgraded, when he's deployed, does become 6 HP, and he comes out on 6, so a lot of things at that point do have 6 health. Sometimes they do have a little bit more, but he's a 4/7, so quite standard stats at that point in the game. But yeah, so what you're generally going to be doing when you have the initiative, play an upgrade straight away, exhaust whatever they've got out on the field so that they can't attack, and then they'll play another unit probably, and then you will probably lose the initiative because then you'll attack and maybe play another unit or upgrade. They'll then have the initiative, etc. So it kind of goes back and forth in that sense. But yeah, and you probably need a sideboard to swap in if you don't have the initiative in the second or third game, to kind of change what you're going to be able to do. But yeah, this is a space deck with a pilot focus to enable the ability. So onto the ground units first before we get into the real meat of the deck. So I've just gone for 2 Grogu because it's a Mandalorian. You've got to have Grogu in there somewhere. His action is just to exhaust an enemy unit. He's a 0/5, so he's quite sticky to get rid of. And even if he doesn't end up exhausting something because they want to just take him out straight away, then that's 5 damage that's not gone onto your base. So that's always pretty useful as well. And then we've gone for 1 Han Solo, the 7-cost Ambusher, 6/6. When attacking, this unit deals combat damage before the defender, so if the 6 damage would kill the enemy unit, he takes no damage back. Just one of those, basically a pseudo removal on the ground if we're just needing to put, well, one to get rid of a threat, but also to put another threat on the board. So those are our ground units, not many of them. So we come onto the wildcard very early on, and wildcard is something I like to highlight in particular that doesn't see a whole lot of use in any deck or in the context of a leader that we're looking at, and Padawan Starfighter falls into it doesn't get used at all. So it is a bit of a gimmick. It's a 2-cost 1/3, so it is utterly abysmal stats. When you think about it, the Green Squadron A-Wing is a 1/3, but at least when it's attacking, it has 3 power. This doesn't. However, while you control a force unit or upgrade, this unit gets +1/+1. So the only enabler we have for that is Anakin Skywalker, the pilot, but if you put Anakin on this, it becomes a 4/7, so it's in the sweet spot where it avoids Fail the Dragon and Takedown, and with the 7 health, it's not going to die anytime soon. So that is the only reason it is in the deck. When Legends of the Force comes out, this will be more useful in other decks, not necessarily in this one, but yeah, if you pull it off, suddenly you've got a very dangerous unit on the board and you've probably exhausted one of theirs. So onto the rest of our space units. So we've got the Fireball, so it comes in and ambushes. It's a 3/3. It's going to be taking out the vast majority of units that can come out on turn 1. However, when the regroup phase starts, deal 1 damage to this unit, so it may be dying very quickly because we cannot CAS it, unfortunately. Resistance X-Wing, so whilst this unit has a pilot on it, it gets +1/+1, so we've got a decent number of pilots. If we use the example of Anakin, he gives it +2/+3 as a base. However, because of the boost, it becomes a 5/6. So it can escalate quite quickly. Restore Dark, staple in blue hero really. Restore 1, and then we can buff it up with our pilots. Death Space Skirmisher, if we don't want to play any kind of upgrade and want to just shove another unit down, then when played, if you control another space unit, you may exhaust a unit. So gives us a good bit of tempo advantage, I think is the phrase that people use. Millennium Falcon, this is our primary source of being able to hit in for big damage, as it's only a 3/4, but you can deploy 2 pilots on it, and this unit gets +1/+0 for each pilot on it. So kind of similar to the X-Wing in that sense. But if you put 1 Anakin on here, it's hitting for 6. Yes, it is hitting for 6. Razor Crest of the blue variety. So this was all the way back in set 2. A 3/4, so okay-ish stats. However, it has a restore 2, which does help if we're trying to race, because we've got exhaust and a bit of restore going on. However, probably the best utility this has is when played, you may return an upgrade from your discard pile to your hand. Now, unfortunately, this doesn't work with pilots because pilots are primarily unit cards. They have the option to be played as an upgrade, but in terms of their, I guess, static state of being, they are a unit, so you cannot return those to your hand, which is why I've only gone for 2 of these as well. The primary upgrade that you want to return to hand is the Perilous Position, which is one of the absolute best cards in the whole deck, and for Mandalorian in particular. We now have the other Razor Crest of the yellow variety, and it's a 3/5, so a bit beefier than the blue version. Now, it has very wordy text that sounds extremely cumbersome, but we'll get there. So when a pilot attaches to this unit, so not an upgrade, you may return a non-leader unit that costs 2 or less. So if it's ready, that can be bounced to their hand, or an exhausted non-leader unit that costs 4 or less to its owner's hand. Now, this works particularly well with Mandalorian, however, because you deploy a pilot onto this, you can exhaust a 4-cost unit, potentially, depending on how much HP it has, and then you can activate the Razor Crest ability to bounce it back to their hand. So we've got a lot of pilots to help activate this, and with Anakin, who we'll highlight in a second, you can recycle it, because when the unit that Anakin attaches to completes an attack, you can choose to return him to your hand, so you can recycle him for 2 resources, put him back on the Razor's Crest if you want, and then get the effect again a second time. So could be very good. Obi-Wan's Ether Sprite, so one of the best space units in the game, I would say. So we've gone for 2 of those, as 5 resources a bit later in the game than... Yeah, just a bit later in game. When played and on attack, you may deal 1 damage to this unit and 2 damage to another space unit. So if they're putting up Space Sentinels, then this can help clear the way. When they see what you've got going on, unless they are also a space deck, so they don't have much choice, they're probably going to be avoiding the space arena if they can, unless it's to dump some Sentinels down. So 4/6, it's a good stat line to avoid foes removal until you do the damage to it, then it's takedown range, but yeah, so it just helps keep the space lane clear. On to our pilots. So Anakin Skywalker, who I've already spoken about, it might sound odd, but he is potentially if things line up, he is the highest power pilot in probably the whole game, I would say, but in this deck as well. So 2/3 on the ground, which generally you want to avoid. Piloting as a 2-cost, and as I said, when the attached unit completes an attack, you may return its upgrade to its owner's hand. So if you're in the later portion of the game and you've got a few space units out, then what you can do is bounce him to your hand after completing the attack, put him on one of your other space units to give them the +2/+3 boost, do the same thing again, and yeah, he can jump around and give you quite a lot of value. And of course, if you have Mandalorian deployed and you want to recycle him, then he might exhaust more than 1 unit in a phase. So Anakin, sneakily very good, and I think generally a bit slept on. But yeah, I think he's very useful. And of course, with Padawan Starfighter, he boosts it to a 4/7. If he's attached to it, if he's just attached to something else, because he is a force upgrade, then the Padawan Starfighter is a 2/4, and then maybe you put a different pilot onto it. So yeah, it all when it works, it's beautiful. Hera, so just gone for two of her. She gives any ship that's attached to restore one. If she's not attached, then she gives restore one as a fail safe anyway. So she's a decent option if you don't have anything to put her on. Han Solo, so the second best pilot in the deck. Well, that's a lie. He's the most consistent pilot in the deck, so he's probably better than Anakin in reality, but Anakin can do some crazy stuff. So Han Solo has the fail-safe option on the ground of ambushing for 4 power, which is okay, can sometimes take out a 4-cost unit. His piloting cost is only 2, considering how good it is. You may attack with the attached units. If it's the Falcon, it deals its combat damage before the Defender. Now, generally, I mean, we've only got 3 Falcons in this deck, so it's not always going to be that. But generally, you're just going to want to smack into their base. It's basically snapshot reflexes, but better. And of course, limited to ships. But gives them +2/+3. So if it's on the Falcon that we do have, it's hitting for 6, and it has 7 health now. And it gets shoot first if you want to take out a Sentinel like Concord Dawn Interceptors, or the Bright Hope. It will give enough power to the Falcon to take out the Bright Hope in one hit, which is very nice. And take no damage back. And then the final pilot we've got is, of course, the Mandalorian himself. So he is actually double yellow if you deploy him on the ground, so he is a 7-cost unit, and sometimes that will still be useful, because when played as a unit, exhaust up to 2 ground units, so you will be preventing quite a lot of damage in that phase in the game if they do have 2 ground units. A 5/6 for a 7-cost is obviously terrible stats, but it does have the very good potential of that effect. And then the piloting cost is only 2, 1 yellow symbol, so it does just cost 2. And when played as an upgrade, exhaust an enemy unit in this arena. So again, if your opponent has a space and a ground unit, you play Mando on your ship, exhaust the ground unit, and then you exhaust their space units with this effect. So you've got 2 exhausts with 1 play. He is the most aggressive pilot in the deck as well, because he gives +3/+1. I think generally I would probably prefer it to be the other way around. Well, maybe not literally +1/+3, but if it was +2/+2, I think that would probably be better. But hey ho, we work with what we've got. So we come on to the bog standard normal upgrades, so to speak. We've got 2 snapshot reflexes, always been one of the best upgrades that you can use with Mando because it's action efficient. When played, you may attack with the attached unit, so you're exhausting one of theirs in most cases, and then immediately attacking with yours, which helps you potentially maintain the initiative. This is also obviously the same with Han as well, because when you're exhausting their units, generally you're going to lose the initiative that phase, but if you've attacked with your unit at the same time, potentially you might be keeping it. Entrenched. So this is a bit of an awkward one, to be honest, because we're primarily a space deck, so entrenching the ground is valid. You entrench one of their units, and then you exhaust the other. So you've just prevented 2 units from attacking into your base with 1 play. Now, the problem that this runs into, of course, is that we have a ground deploy leader. So you're basically setting them up to have a pretty high-powered unit to just run into your leader and take him out, potentially in 1 hit, possibly 2. So it does have its drawbacks, I think that's why I've only gone with 2, to be honest. But yeah. And then Perilous Position, so one of the absolute best cards in the whole deck, and just one of the best cards that Mando can use in general. So you'll know what it does. When played, exhaust attached units. Gives them -2/-2 as a bonus. However, because it's an upgrade, with Mando, you will be able to exhaust a second unit. So you're 2, similar to Entrenched in a way, you're 2 for 1 in exhaust effects with 1 card, which is always extremely powerful. So let's say they've got Poe Dameron unit out, you play this on him, he's exhausted for the phase, and then you exhaust, I can't think of a full health unit off the top of my head. The Millennium Falcon in space, let's say that. So yeah, it's extremely high value, and with the blue Razor Crest, we can bring it back. So if you have a blue Razor Crest in hand that you're potentially going to play next phase, and they have a 2 health unit, so you might want to play the Perilous Position on the 2 health unit so that it dies, which means Perilous Position goes to your discard, you play Razor Crest, bring it back. Recycle. It's all good. And onto our events, just a few of those, because in a way our upgrades and pilots are our events because they have an effect when they're used. But spare the target times 3, so it's waylay, but only for your opponents, with the added bonus that if they happen to have a bounty on their unit, then you can collect that as well. We're not running any bounties ourselves, but it's a possibility. I can't think of a situation really where we're going to want to waylay our own units because we're playing an upgrade game. Commandeer, just gone for one of those. It's 5 costs. Take control of a non-leader vehicle unit, costs 6 or less without a pilot on it. If you do ready it, at the start of regroup phase, return that unit to its owner's hand. So this is if you're against potentially another pilot deck, or if there's a pilot leader deck. So if you're against a Luke Skywalker, and they've got like Red 5, for example, you don't particularly want Luke going onto that in a ready state. So you could commandeer Red 5 before he's able to do that, and then you're laughing, hopefully. But it's only one off because it's situational. If they're not running any vehicles in their deck, it's a dead card. So, and then our final event is Cunning. So because it's double yellow, it does cost 6, and that's why I've only gone for 2 of them. But it is one of the best cards in the game, so paying an extra 2 for it is not too bad. Now, what does it do? It has 4 different options, and you choose 2, and they take place in any order. Now, generally, that's only relevant if you're going for the discard option as well. So if you're wanting them to potentially have to discard something that you're bouncing back to their hand, then you would pick the bounce option first, and then say the discard option. Obviously, it's a bit of a gamble, but sometimes it can be valid if you're returning a cheap Sentinel to their hand that you don't want to see again. But generally, what I would say is the options we're going to be taking are any combination of the top 3. So returning a non-leader unit is generally going to be if they've dumped a Sentinel down that we just want to not have to hit through at the moment. Give a unit +4 for this phase, so this deck can lack a bit of punch at times, so giving the +4 can help us really change the math, so to speak, and get the game done quicker. And then, of course, exhaust up to 2 units. So when we're at the 6 resource slot in the game, it's going to be more difficult for Mando's ability to actually exhaust enemy units. So being able to do it with an event instead can be a good substitute. So the missing pieces that I can think of, that are pretty obvious anyway, is the Spark of Rebellion Millennium Falcon. I do not have any, but if you do have 3 of them, then I would say you can definitely fit those in. I won't talk about it too much. And then I only have 2 Han Solo pilots, but if I had a 3rd, then he would definitely be going in as well. Possibly in place of Hera, I would say. And then we'd still have 1 Hera remaining. So other options, so I think if you, when constructing a sideboard, you probably need one for when you don't have the initiative. But these are just some other general options for the deck as a whole. Confiscate, so I have found that shielded Sentinels can be a particular problem, and what's even more of a problem, shielded Sentinels have Chewie on them. So Confiscate can take Chewie out, and then you can just deal with the Sentinel at your own pace. Breaking in, so this will help us get through any Sentinels because it gives them Saboteur. Clear the field is another bounce option. A lot of Sentinels are 3 or less cost, so this is a cheaper option to be able to get rid of those. Page Tico, so as I say, this deck can lack a bit of punch. She is only a 2-cost pilot, and on attack, give an experience token to this unit and deal 1 damage to it. So effectively, the HP is always staying the same, but it's progressively gaining 1 power with every attack. So yeah, it just helps to stack up the damage that we're dealing. And then Trace Martez. So I put her in the other options because she is a 1-cost pilot, and the biggest problem this deck has really is when you've got your 3 resources, so your second turn, oftentimes you are just ending up playing a pilot, which means you've got 1 resource left. with Trace, if you have her in the deck, you can play her for 1, exhaust their unit, and then play another 2 cost space unit. So I think she may have a place in the deck, but yeah. And what does she actually do? She's not commonly used. On attack, you may heal 2 damage from any number of units. So it's a bit misleading. It's actually it sounds like you can heal 2 damage from an unlimited amount of units. It's 2 total. So you could heal 1 damage from 1 unit and 1 damage from another. That's how it works potentially. So a bit of scouting for Legends of the Force now that the whole set has been released, not released but revealed. So the N1 Starfighter, this would come in and replace the Resistance X-Wing. Yes, it will have 1 less health than the Resistance X-Wing when it's got a pilot on it, but the extra power means that it doesn't die. Well, sorry, it does die to Blue Leader and stuff like that, but at least it will take it with them. So yeah, this would absolutely replace Resistance X-Wing. The T6 Shuttle 1974. So when this unit is attacked, it gains an experience token. So if they were to Eager Escort Fighter ambush into it, this will actually survive because it gains the experience token before the combat has actually occurred. So it will be a 4/5. It will have 1 health remaining. So yeah, this would probably go in as well. The Blue Squadron Assault Wing, so it's a relatively plain unit. It has Raid 1, so it just gives us a bit more attack power as we're approaching the higher resource points in the game, so it hits for 6, which can be useful. The Stinger Mantis may have a place, because let's say, I mean, Poe Dameron is commonly used in red hero decks. Mandalorian's ability can't exhaust him because he has 6 health. Well, if they deploy him at 5 resources and then you play Stinger Mantis at 5, then when played you may deal 2 damage to an exhausted unit, put Poe back down to 5, back to 4 health I should say, and then you can debate as to whether you want to take initiative before doing any damage so that you can then play an upgrade and exhaust Poe again the next phase straight away. So yeah, it might be a bit of an awkward one to get to work, but I think it has a place. Or you just take out a 3/2 unit on the ground or space, which is also going to be pretty useful. And the Legacy run, I don't know if this would really work, but it could do a bit of a board wipe on the ground if things are getting a little bit hairy down there when it's defeated. But it is a legendary, so whether you're going to realistically get 3 of these, I do not know. But it might have a place, who knows. So that is the deck. What I will say is that it is very tricky to run because you do have to plan ahead and think, okay, well, if I play a pilot here, what does that leave me with resources? Do I want to save my pilot for the next phase? Do I need to deploy another unit instead? All that kind of thing. Anakin in particular, trying to play him to maximum efficiency, or if you do want to bounce him, it requires quite a bit of planning ahead and thinking, okay, well, if I do return him to hand, am I actually helping my opponent more than I'm helping myself? So it can be quite tricky. This deck should be very good against aggro in general because they are not going to be able to attack as much as they should be whilst you are able to. This deck, when it works, it feels excellent, but when it doesn't, it's quite a grind, and you're probably just going to lose, unfortunately. It is very dependent on what you are drawing at pretty much all points in the game. If you just end up with a lot of pilots and your ships are gone, then obviously this deck is naff. If you're I mean, the worst combo would be you've only drawn pilots and you've got entrenched, and you're just going to be deploying pilots on the ground with nothing else you can do really. So yeah. But I think there is only so much you can do with a Mandalorian deck, unfortunately. If his ability was to include experience tokens and shields, for example, then he potentially might be Django levels of busted, maybe a bit lower than that. But when you think about it, Django, he would just play units and get the exhaust effect just by playing the unit. Well, with Mando, you could play like Crafty Smuggler and exhaust an enemy unit because you played a shield on it, but alas, that is not how his ability works. So we can dream maybe the next time they make a Mando leader, he'll be a bit more viable. But yeah, it can be quite a fun deck when it pulls off and when it works. It feels really good, but when it doesn't, it doesn't feel great. So anyway, let me know what you think. It has been a bit while since I've done a video. It took me a few weeks to figure this deck out, to be honest, and then I played an abysmal Hera blue deck the other week, so I was not going to share that one. But anyway, we've got Legends of the Force in about a month, so I think my next video is going to be a Luke. It might be a bumper Luke jump to light speed one because I can't decide between Lake Country, Tarkin Town, and just a plain old red base. So yeah, keep an eye out for that, and I'll see you in the next one.